CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now for more on all of this. Hi, Nancy. So, of course, on a fittingly hot day, the president is addressing the issue of climate change. How significant are these executive actions he just laid out in terms of furthering his goals to combat the climate crisis?
Well, I think it's significant that he is turning to executive action at all. It is an indication that he is very troubled by recent developments in talks on Capitol Hill to try to pass a major climate change bill. It means he's turning to measures he can take by himself, measures specifically to encourage investment in offshore wind. So let me just give you a couple of the highlights that he just announced. First of all, he's going to be directing the Department of Interior to propose a wind energy area in the Gulf of Mexico that is 700,000 acres with the potential to power 3 million homes. He's also directing that money in the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed earlier this year, that it would go towards helping to subsidize the cost of home cooling systems, and that would enable states to use federal funds for cooling centers in schools when the temperature gets too hot. He's speaking, fittingly, today from Massachusetts, which is under a heat advisory itself because we are experiencing such warm weather. And I think most significantly in that speech for the first time, he said that he would be declaring a federal climate emergency in the coming weeks, which would free up even more federal funds to be directed towards renewable energy, investments in renewable energy to try to move the U.S. away from greenhouse gases. That's something that he had been hoping to do primarily with legislation, but that legislation right now is stalled.
On that point, Nancy, how do these executive actions compare to the president's climate deal that had been stalled, notably by Democratic Senator Joe Manchin? And remind us, Nancy, how the economy factors into, at least according to Senator Manchin, his decision not to back a climate deal right now.
This is frankly a drop in the bucket compared to what President Biden had been proposing. I mean, when you talk about $380 million that he wants to direct, the White House is announcing today towards helping people with home cooling. The bill that he was pushing on Capitol Hill was $550 billion in tax credits, tax incentives aimed not just at individuals, but at industry as well. Tax incentives for the energy industry to move away from fossil fuels and make it more economical to invest in renewables, for non-energy industries to use renewables to power their factories and plants. And, everything from a $12,000 tax credit for individuals who buy electric vehicles to tax incentives for people to put solar panels on their roofs. Mm-hmm. So that was a really broad-based piece of legislation aimed at helping the U.S. reach these very aggressive goals that the president laid out for leaders from the entire world when he went to Glasgow, Scotland, to a major climate summit where he said that he wanted to reduce U.S. emissions by 50%. That is going to be very difficult. Some environmentalists would say impossible if he has to do it with this sort of piecemeal approach of executive action rather than through systematic legislation.
Right. And Nancy, the president is facing increased pressure to declare a national climate emergency. The White House says that is something he's considering, but he notably did not declare it today, elected not to do so. Why might that be?
He didn't declare it today, but he announced that he is going to declare it in the coming weeks. He said that he has already directed various agencies to begin to prepare for that formal declaration. That is a major development and a sign that that he is going to move more aggressively to try to do whatever he can on his own now that his legislative efforts have stalled. And this is a major development. If you think about during the Trump years, when President Trump announced a federal emergency at the border, that freed up funds in the Pentagon and elsewhere so that he could build portions of a wall at the southern border that was incredibly controversial. And this will be no less controversial if President Biden uses the power that he has by declaring a federal emergency to do things like halt new oil and gas drilling permits. That's something that would probably end up in the courts. But at the very least, the Biden administration will likely argue that it buys them some time and sends a powerful message to the energy industry that this is where things are inevitably heading, and they need to get on board. But there's no question that this is going to be, this is not the path that he was hoping to take. But as he pointed out in that speech, he doesn't have the votes. He is one Democrat short. And by the way, he doesn't have any Republican support to take these measures that he and so many environmentalists say are necessary to keep the planet within a safe band of global warming beyond which humans cannot exist on this planet.
We'll be watching to see when that official emergency declaration comes.
Absolutely.
Nancy Cordes on the North Lawn of the White House. Nancy, thank you.
You're welcome.